The sun was beginning to rise over the narrow streets of Varanasi. The ancient city hummed with early morning life. Temple bells rang in the distance. Rickshaws moved lazily through dusty lanes, and the scent of marigolds and incense floated in the air. But one woman stood quietly by the eastern gate of the ashram, unmoving, unnoticed. Her name was Meenal. She wore a faded green sari, the hem slightly torn. Her feet were bare. A small cloth bag rested beside her, heavy with papers and a folded shawl. She had been waiting since before dawn, standing in silence near the outer entrance where security usually kept people away. But today, no one asked her to leave. Perhaps it was the stillness in her eyes, or the way she stood, not desperate, not demanding, just steady. Like a question waiting to be answered. Meenal had come with no appointment, no contacts, and no plan. But she had a story, and in her heart, she carried one small hope, that someone might listen. At exactly 7:02 a.m., the Prime Minister's convoy began approaching the ashram. The security detail moved into motion. Plainclothes officers checked every corner. Uniformed men stood alert. Photographers adjusted their lenses. The usual buzz surrounded the arrival of someone powerful. But Meenal stood unnoticed, her gaze fixed not on the convoy, but on the earth beneath her feet. Then something unexpected happened. The convoy slowed, not because of her. She was too far from the main gate to be seen clearly. But perhaps by fate or something deeper. Prime Minister Modi looked out the window of his car and noticed the still figure by the gate. She was not waving, not shouting, not holding a banner, just standing. Modi asked his driver to stop. His security team hesitated. This was not protocol. They insisted on maintaining routine. But Modi held up a hand, calm but firm. He opened the car door himself and stepped out. Alone. No guards, no aides. No aides. Just him. Meenal looked up as he approached. Her eyes did not widen in surprise. She simply nodded, as if she had known this moment would come. Modi spoke first. "Are you waiting for someone?" She nodded. "I was hoping someone might listen." There was a pause. The sun now fully touched the red stone walls behind them. The crowd nearby fell into a stunned silence. Even the photographers forgot to raise their cameras. Modi gestured toward a bench near the gate. "Shall we sit?" No one could believe what they were seeing. The Prime Minister, leader of one of the largest nations, walking over to a stranger and sitting beside her with no security between them. Meenal took a breath and sat. Her hands trembled slightly. "What brings you here?" he asked gently. She looked at him, and for a moment, the mask of leadership melted away. She was not speaking to a politician. She was speaking to a man. "I am from a village called Madhugram, 38 years old, teacher, daughter, once a wife." Her voice did not shake, though her eyes held a storm. "I came because I wrote a letter. 10, in fact." No one answered. Then one day, someone told me to wait here. They said maybe the wind would carry my voice. Modi listened. UNMOVING. She reached into her cloth bag and pulled out a stack of weathered papers. "These are the stories of my students. They walk 7 kilometers to school each day. The roof leaks in monsoon. We lost a child last year. No one came. Not from the district. Not from the state." She paused. "I do not want charity. I want dignity." Her voice was low. There was no anger in her tone, only truth. Modi leaned forward, reading the names on the top paper. He recognized the district. He knew the statistics. But this was a face to the numbers. "Why didn't you go to the local office?" he asked. "I did, many times. They said come tomorrow, until the tomorrows ran out." There was a long silence. The wind moved through the neem trees. Behind them. Meenal looked at him and added softly, "You speak of India's daughters. I am one of them." Something shifted in Modi's expression, not because of guilt, not because of pressure, but because the woman in front of him had stripped away the walls of politics and left only the question every leader must answer. Are you listening? A security officer stepped forward, uncertain. Modi raised a hand, not to wave him off but to pause the moment. He looked at Meenal again and said, "Walk with me." Her eyes widened. "Sir, let's go inside. I want to understand more." He stood up. She followed, slowly, and as they walked through the ashram gate together, him in a simple kurta, her in her tattered sari, the cameras finally clicked. Not because they were told to, but because history was happening. Meenal, the woman from Madhugram, had been heard. But what neither of them knew was that this single meeting would lead to a ripple series of choices that would touch lives far beyond the village, far beyond that quiet gate. And it would all begin with the next step. Meenal walked beside Modi through the ashram corridor, her heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't known before. The sound of her own sandals on the stone floor reminded her of the school back in Madhugram, where every step felt like a battle, every day a quiet fight. Inside the ashram, silence wrapped around them like a shawl. There were no flashing lights here, no shouting, only two voices about to shape something no one had planned. Modi gestured toward a small veranda overlooking the courtyard. They sat on a stone bench under a peepal tree. A squirrel darted across the floor. The smell of boiling tea drifted in from the kitchen. Meenal, single quotes, his fingers curled around the cloth bag resting on her lap. She had held on to these letters for over a year. Every word was written after a sleepless night, every sentence carrying the weight of children who didn't know what it meant to dream anymore. "Tell me more about your students," Modi asked gently. She nodded. "There are 29 children, ages 6 to 14, boys and girls. One of them, Deepak, lost his father in a road accident last year. He still comes to school every morning and helps his mother in the fields afterward." Modi listened closely. "There is another girl, Arfa. She carries water before coming to school. She's 12, sharp as a blade, wants to be a lawyer, but she has no books, no uniform, no hope unless something changes." Meenal's eyes welled up. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed. "I do not cry often," she said, "but I think today I need to." Modi didn't interrupt. He let her continue. "The school has one room, half a roof, broken benches. I teach them in turns to classes at a time. I sing poems so they remember words. I draw on the walls with chalk. Sometimes I act like a tree or a tiger just so they laugh." A small smile flickered on her lips. "They laugh like stars falling on dry earth." Modi leaned back, taking it all in. This was not a political briefing. It was something else, something personal. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked. "Because if I left," Meenal replied softly, "who would stay?" Outside, a group of journalists had gathered near the gate. They still didn't know what was happening inside, but word had spread Modi had walked away from protocol for a woman no one knew. Inside, the Prime Minister looked at the stack of letters again. "You wrote 10 letters, he said. She nodded. "Some to the collector, some to the education board, and one to you." Modi raised an eyebrow. "I didn't expect a reply," she added, "but writing it helped me breathe." He looked at her for a long moment. "I never saw it." "I know," she said quietly. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was honest. "What would you change first if you had the power?" he asked. Meenal didn't hesitate. "I'd start with a roof. Not a big one. Just one that doesn't leak when it rains. Children shouldn't be wet while learning multiplication." He nodded. "Then benches, a fan, chalk, books, clean water." She paused, then added, "and someone to help me teach. Even just one more person." Modi smiled gently. "That sounds like a real plan, not a dream." "Dreams are not the problem," she said. "It's the silence that follows them." Just then, his aide appeared quietly near the door, holding a file. He hesitated before approaching. Modi waved him off. Not now. Meenal stood up slowly. I've taken too much of your time. Thank you for listening. But Modi also stood. Wait. She turned, surprised. Come with me tomorrow, he said. I want to visit your school. Her eyes widened. Sir, I want to see what you see with my own eyes. But security your schedule. Sometimes, he said softly, the schedule needs to follow the heart. For a moment, Meenal couldn't speak. Do you really mean it? He nodded. She lowered her eyes and whispered, Then I will be ready. As she stepped out of the ashram gate, the same one where she had waited all morning, she felt something new. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was a quiet understanding that someone had heard her. And maybe, just maybe, the wind had carried her voice after all. The next day was already beginning to shape itself into something unforgettable. But neither Meenal nor Modi could predict what would happen when the convoy reached Madhugram, because, in the shadows of progress, not everyone welcomes change. The next morning came like a quiet drumbeat across the fields of Madhugram. Roosters crowed, women drew water from hand pumps, barefoot children chased each other through narrow lanes lined with cracked mud walls and small tea stalls. But something was different in the air. It was not just the heat. It was the way people looked toward the road, as if something big was coming, because it was. Meenal stood at the village entrance with her sari, freshly washed, and her hands pressed together tightly. She hadn't told anyone the truth, only that a visitor might come. Not even her students knew, but inside her heart knew this was no ordinary day. Far away, near the bend where the fields met the road, the faint sound of engines began to rise. A dust cloud followed. Villagers came out slowly, curious. Old men gathered under neem trees. Women peeked from behind door curtains. Some boys ran up the dirt trail to get a better view. And then it appeared. A small convoy of black and white cars, moving carefully down the narrow village path. No sirens. No announcements. Just presence. Meenal. Single quotes as breath caught in her chest as the cars stopped quietly near the school gate. The vehicle in front opened. Prime Minister Modi stepped out, dressed in a plain white kurta, his face calm and observant. There was no loud cheer, no staged welcome, only silence and stunned faces. Meenal walked forward slowly. You came, she whispered. Modi nodded. You invited me. A young boy from the village, about 7 years old, ran up to Meenal and tugged at her hand. Didi, who is he? She smiled down. Someone who wants to see your classroom. The school stood just beyond the road, a small building made of brick and tin. Its walls were chipped, the roof patched with plastic sheets. A blackboard leaned on 2 stones. There was a broken swing in the corner of the yard. Modi walked slowly toward the entrance. No carpet, no garlands. Just the sound of birds and the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes. As he stepped inside, he looked around. There were no lights. 2 benches, 5 mats on the floor, a single cupboard, half full with worn-out books. The walls were hand-painted, with poems, numbers, and stories, clearly drawn by Meenal herself. This is where it happens, he asked. She nodded. He walked to the back wall, where a large crack ran from the ceiling to the floor. He touched it gently. When it rains, Meenal said, I move the children to the far side. We sing loudly, so they don't hear the thunder. He turned to look at her, and she didn't blink. She stood there, not as someone seeking pity, but as someone offering truth. The children began to arrive, curious and barefoot. They carried slates, a few worn bags, and wide eyes. When they saw the Prime Minister, they froze. Meenal smiled and gestured for them to sit. Don't be afraid, she said. He came to see you. Modi sat on a low stool in the corner as the children settled down. One of them, Arfa, stood up shyly. Sir, she said, we know poems. Should we say one? He smiled. Yes, I would like that, she began. The sky is wide, The ground is near, we learn with heart, we speak with cheer. The other children joined in, their voices rising like the morning wind through dry leaves. Modi clapped softly at the end. Then he asked, "What do you want to become?" Deepak raised his hand. "Policeman." Another boy, Sanu, shouted. "Cricketer." Arfa said quietly. "Lawyer." Meenal looked at her with pride. Modi leaned forward. "And what do you need?" Deepak smiled. "Books, sir." Sanu added, "Fan. It's hot." Arfa whispered, "Time." That word stayed in the air longer than the rest. After an hour, Modi stood up and walked outside. Journalists had arrived by now, standing at a distance. Cameras clicked, questions buzzed, but he raised his hand and signaled for silence. He looked at the school once more. Then, in front of the whole village, he said, "This is not just a school. It is the heart of India." He turned to Meenal. "You built this heart. Now let us strengthen it." Her lips trembled, but she stayed composed. She had fought too long to lose to emotion now. Modi continued, "This school will have a roof within 30 days. Benches, books, electricity, and a second teacher. I promise it." Someone in the crowd gasped. An old man murmured, "He means it." But not everyone was happy. At the edge of the gathering stood a man with crossed arms and sharp eyes. His name was Shankar, head of the local panchayat. He had ignored Meenal's letters for months. If this school rose, his grip on the village would weaken. Progress threatened his control, and he didn't like it. As the Prime Minister's visit ended, and the convoy rolled away down the dusty trail, Meenal stood still, eyes closed, letting the moment settle in her bones. But behind her, Shankar's eyes burned with quiet anger, because for every step forward, there are shadows that try to pull you back. The next morning in Madhugram didn't begin with birdsong. Instead, it began with whispers. Women at the well paused their chatter. Men in the tea stalls leaned closer, their voices low. Even the children played quieter than usual, because something had shifted in. Not everyone was happy about it. The promise from the Prime Minister had lit a spark across the village. For the first time, the people felt seen. The children were smiling more. The elders talked of new benches and working fans. Someone even started repainting the faded school sign using leftover whitewash. But in one corner of the village, a door slammed shut. Inside sat Shankar, the panchayat head, pacing back and forth. His jaw clenched as he stared at the newspaper. In his hand, the front page showed a photo of Modi standing beside a village school with Meenal beside him. No mention of the panchayat, no mention of Shankar, only her. "She humiliated me," he muttered, "in front of the country." His younger brother, who had just entered with tea, said carefully, "But she didn't speak against you." "Silence speaks louder than words," Shankar snapped. And now everyone sees her as the hero. The truth was deeper than pride. Shankar had always controlled who got what: ration cards, school funds, water access. If the school got rebuilt from Delhi, it would break that chain. He couldn't afford that. Outside, life moved on. Meenal returned to teaching with a quiet joy in her steps. She hung new charts on the wall and told her students, "We will need to work harder. Guests may come again." The children laughed and began preparing welcome songs. Arfa stayed after class. "Didi, will we really get a new roof?" Meenal smiled. "You'll see stars through windows, not holes in the ceiling." The next few days brought more activity. A team from the district office came to inspect the school. Workers measured the yard. Blueprints were drawn. Timelines were set. But every time a truck entered the village, Shankar watched from the shadows, and one evening, he made his move. Meenal was returning from a parent meeting, walking down the dusty road with her shawl pulled tight. The air was still, too still. Just as she reached the school gate, a group of men blocked her path. Shankar stood at the front, arms folded. "You've made quite a name for yourself," he said. Meenal didn't respond. Did you forget whose village this is? He asked. She met his eyes. It belongs to the people, to the children. He stepped closer. You went above me, embarrassed me. Now things are out of order. No, she said softly. Now things are finally in order. His face darkened. You think one visit makes you powerful? When those trucks leave, you'll still be here, alone. Meenal's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. Maybe. But if being alone means standing for what's right, then I'm not afraid. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably. One even lowered his eyes. Shankar took a step back but left her with one final sentence. The panchayat meets tomorrow. If you have sense, you'll apologize. Then they walked away. That night, Meenal sat in her tiny home, lighting a single candle. She opened her diary and wrote down her thoughts not as a complaint, but as a record of courage. The next morning, she dressed early. Her steps toward the panchayat hall were heavy, but certain. Villagers stood outside, curious. No one had seen such a stir in years. Shankar sat at the front, his expression cold. You came, he said. Meenal nodded. I don't wish to fight, I only wish to teach. He leaned forward. Then you'll apologize for going around the panchayat? No, she said calmly, because I did nothing wrong. The hall fell silent. Meenal stepped forward and pulled out her letters. She placed them on the table. These were sent to the block office, the district office, your office. Not once, not twice, 10 times. No answer. I waited for years. She paused, then continued. When no one responded, I didn't give up. I stood by the gate of an ashram because I had no doors left to knock, and someone listened. Not because I am loud, but because truth has its own sound. There was silence. Again this time, deeper. A few elders looked at one another. A woman from the back whispered, She's right. Someone else added, She's the only one who's done anything. Shankar looked around, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. Power, once easy to hold, was slipping through fingers like sand. He stood up. This is not how things are done. But his words were cut short by the sound of clapping. One person, then another, and then the whole room. Meenal didn't smile. She simply bowed her head in respect and walked out. As she stepped into the sunlight, a little boy ran up to her. It was Deepak. He held out a small chalkboard. On it, written in wobbly letters, were the words, Thank you, Didi. She took it, her eyes misting. No, she whispered, thank you. But far away, in a nearby district office, a fax arrived addressed to the Prime Minister's office. Its contents were strange, full of vague complaints and warnings about the school project, signed anonymously, but the signature style was clear. Someone was trying to stop the progress from reaching Madhugram. The battle was not over yet. 3 days after the panchayat meeting, the trucks came. Not slowly, not secretly, with workers, bricks, cement, steel rods, and blue tarps for temporary shade. They came not just with tools, but with hope. Meenal watched from the edge of the schoolyard as they began clearing the ground. The children stood nearby, eyes wide. Arfa kept whispering, They're really here. They're really here. Meenal placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Yes, they are. As construction began, the village atmosphere changed. People who had once been silent now spoke of progress. They gathered around the school, offering water to workers, helping with lifting, and clearing broken bricks. A tea vendor brought free cups for the laborers. 2 young boys painted the village name on a wooden board to welcome guests, and someone, no one knows who, tied a garland to the broken swing in the yard. Change had begun to breathe, but in the shadow of the tamarind trees Shankar watched silently. He hadn't spoken since the panchayat meeting, but he hadn't left either. Every nail that hit wood, every child's laugh, Every conversation about the new future all scraped against his pride, like sandpaper. And then the warning came. It was early morning. Meenal had arrived at the school to greet the labor team. The sun was soft, and the scent of rain was in the air. But something felt strange. A wall, the outer boundary of the school, was gone. Completely. Flattened. Meenal rushed forward. Bricks were scattered. The cement was broken, as if someone had hit it with heavy tools in the night. A chill ran down her spine. The workers stood around quietly. None of them had seen anything. No one had heard. But someone had clearly made a statement. "Stop building," the act whispered. But Meenal didn't pause. She picked up a brick herself and began stacking it. Not perfectly, not fast, but clearly. One of the laborers stepped forward and joined her. Then another. Within 10 minutes, the work had resumed. By noon, the outer wall had been half rebuilt. Meenal didn't look at anyone. She just worked. Her hands were sore, but her back was straight. Inside her, something had solidified. If they wanted to break walls, she would build more. News reached the district office within hours, and by evening, a senior officer called Meenal directly. "Madam," he said cautiously, "this incident, do you wish to file a complaint?" Meenal looked out the school window, at the children painting shapes on the wall. "No," she said, "I wish you to come see for yourself." The officer agreed. He arrived the next morning along with 2 journalists and a legal clerk. They walked through the site. They saw the crushed bricks. They spoke to workers. They heard from parents and children. And at the center of it all, they saw Meenal still calm, still unbroken. The journalist, a woman named Prerna, asked her, "Why didn't you report it immediately?" Meenal replied, "Because I didn't want the story to be about destruction. I want it to be about courage." Prerna smiled. "Then let's write that." The article published that evening told the story not just of the school, but of a teacher who stood without fear. It described the crushed wall, the silent opposition, and the louder response of rebuilding. Meanwhile, the district officer filed a formal report. But what no one knew was that a copy of the article had reached Delhi, placed directly on the desk of the Prime Minister's secretary. Modi read it that evening. He closed the paper, looked out the window of his office, and picked up the phone. He called the education secretary. "I want to visit Madhugram again," he said, quietly. "This time, no cameras, no crowds." The secretary was surprised. "Sir, it's only been a week, and a week can show who we are," Modi replied. In Madhugram, the next few days passed with nervous hope. The children practiced a song about unity. The schoolyard filled with materials. Women from the village brought food for the laborers. Meenal didn't rest. She taught, helped build, and encouraged everyone. But deep inside, she still feared another night of sabotage. So she began keeping a journal of everything who visited. What was said, what was changed. Not to accuse, but to remember. One night, as she sat writing, Arfa appeared outside her window. "Didi," she said softly, "I can't sleep." Meenal smiled. "Come inside." Arfa sat beside her on the floor. "What if they try again?" Meenal looked at her. "Then we try again too." Arfa tilted her head. "But you're tired." "Yes," Meenal admitted, "but some things are worth being tired for." The next morning, something unexpected happened. Shankar came to the school, alone. The workers tensed. Some villagers stood at a distance. Meenal stepped outside to meet him. He didn't speak at first. His eyes moved across the yard, the walls half built, the children painting again, the women preparing meals. Then he looked at her. "I fought the wrong fight," he said finally. She didn't reply. He continued, "I thought silence meant power, but your silence, it made people listen more than my words." She nodded slowly. "It's not too late." He shook his head. "It is, but it's not too late for the village." And then he walked away. Min turned to go back inside. Her hands still carried cement stains. Her sleeves were torn at the edge, but her eyes glowed, because she had not won a battle. She had helped someone else lose their fear. And on the edge of that same day, under a sky turning gold with dusk, a white car approached the village, quiet, simple, and unnoticed. Inside it sat Modi. No convoy, no speech, no speech, just one man, returning to see the change that one woman had started. The car stopped just outside the rebuilt school wall. There were no loudspeakers, no red carpets, no posters on poles. No one knew, no one expected, but Meenal standing at the edge of the yard with chalk dust on her hands and a scarf tied to keep her hair back, heard the quiet sound of a door opening. She turned, and for a moment, she did not move. Prime Minister Modi stepped out of the car in a plain white kurta, the same calm expression on his face as the first day she had seen him, at the ashram gate. There were no bodyguards, just his secretary standing at a distance, holding a folder. Meenal walked forward slowly, brushing her hands on her sari. "You came," she whispered again. He smiled. "You called me without speaking." They stood in silence as the sounds of the school continued behind them, children laughing, hammers tapping, someone singing a lesson from inside. Modi looked around. "You've built something powerful." Meenal lowered her eyes. "I only showed them it was possible." They walked side by side through the schoolyard. The wall had been rebuilt, stronger than before. A small garden had begun to bloom with marigolds. The children had painted their handprints in bright colors along the walls. Modi stopped near the new classroom building. Inside, Arfa was leading a group of younger children in a reading session. She looked up and froze. Modi nodded at her. "Please continue." Arfa grinned and kept reading. Meenal leaned against the wall, her voice soft. "They used to be afraid of school. Now they run toward it." "What about you?" Modi asked. "I used to feel alone," she said. "Now I feel seen." They stepped outside again, where a small circle of villagers had begun to gather, not out of curiosity, but from quiet recognition. No one cheered. They simply stood with respect. Modi turned to face them. He didn't climb a stage. He didn't read from a paper. He just spoke. "This school is not a symbol of government. It is a symbol of courage." He looked at Meenal. "When leaders forget to listen, voices like hers bring us back." The villagers nodded. Modi continued. "This place was not built with money. It was built with belief. And belief," he paused, "is the most powerful foundation." He then pulled a paper from his pocket. "From today, Madhugram School will be part of the Model Village Learning Initiative. It will receive ongoing support not as a favor, but as a duty." A gasp moved through the crowd. The parents exchanged looks. One mother began to cry silently. Meenal blinked slowly, letting the moment sink in. But Modi wasn't done. And to ensure others like Meenal never feel unheard again, he added, "We are launching a new initiative, Voice to Classroom. Any teacher, from any village, can send a direct message to the ministry's special unit. No approvals needed, just a story, just a truth." The crowd clapped, not wildly, but deeply, like rain after drought. Modi turned to leave, but before he stepped into the car, he looked back at Meenal. "When you stood by the ashram gate, what were you hoping for?" Meenal smiled. "Just that. Someone would see a teacher as more than a chalk holder." He nodded, eyes steady. "Today, the whole country sees you." And with that, he left. No fanfare, just footprints on the dusty road. Over the next few weeks, things changed rapidly. The school was completed ahead of schedule. New uniforms arrived, books, benches, a water pump. 2 new teachers joined. But more than that, children from nearby villages began coming. The yard was full every day. Meenal continued teaching. She still wore the same style of sari, still carried her cloth bag. But now, when she walked through the village, People greeted her with folded hands, not out of fear, but out of respect. Shankar visited once more. He brought with him a box of sweets and said, "You built the school. Now let's build the village." She smiled and shook his hand. The greatest change wasn't in bricks or policies, it was in hearts. One afternoon, as she sat with her students, Arfa asked, "Didi, will you ever stop teaching?" Meenal laughed gently. "Only when no child needs to be taught." "So?" Deepak added, "Never?" She nodded with a twinkle in her eyes. "Maybe?" Outside, the village road was quiet again. But at the ashram far away, someone had painted a small sentence on the outer wall. "Sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that lead us home." Meenal never saw it, but she didn't need to, because the path she had carved, step by step, with silence and strength, was now a path many would walk. And it had all started with a moment no one expected. A man of power, and a woman waiting quietly by a gate. Months had passed since the school in Madhugram had become more than just a place to study. It had become a place to belong. The building was now painted in soft colors, and the classrooms had working fans, clean floors, and bright windows. There were shelves filled with books, and charts made by the children themselves. Outside, the once broken swing now stood repaired, and flowers grew beside it, planted by the students with their own hands. But beneath all the visible changes, something deeper had taken root. It was pride, not pride in medals or fame, pride in effort, pride in effort, pride in care, and pride in being. Meenal still woke up before sunrise. She still walked the same road to school, holding the same bag, wearing the same simplicity. But her presence now carried a quiet light. Wherever she went, people listened. Yet one evening, as she sat alone under the neem tree beside the school gate, she opened an old cloth bundle and took out something fragile, her very first letter, the one she had written months ago, addressed to the Prime Minister, sealed with a thread because she had no proper envelope. She had never sent it. She had written it, folded it, and then kept it inside her bag as a reminder of what she believed, but had no way to deliver. Now, holding it in her hands again, she read the lines aloud, softly, to the wind. "Dear Sir, I am a teacher in a small village. My school has no roof. The children still come, but the rain comes too. I do not ask for money or attention. I only ask that you believe we exist, because we do. Sincerely, Meenal." She smiled, shook her head gently, and laughed under her breath. So much had changed since then, and still, this little letter had never reached anyone until now. The next day, during morning assembly, Meenal called Arfa forward and handed her the letter. "What is it?" Arfa asked. "A promise," Meenal replied. "And I want you to deliver it." Arfa's eyes widened. "To who?" "To Delhi," she said. "We've been invited." A week later, something remarkable happened. Meenal, along with Arfa and Deepak, traveled by train to the capital. For most of the children, it was their first time outside the district. Deepak stared out the train window the entire journey, whispering, "Look at the sky. It's so big." They were received not as guests, but as examples. Meenal was honored at a quiet gathering inside a hall near Parliament. No camera flashes, no stage speeches, just simple chairs, filled with people who had come to listen. And then, something unexpected occurred. Modi entered the room not as the main speaker, but as a listener. He sat beside school children, shared tea with teachers, and asked stories from each village represented. When it was Meenal's turn, she stood and held up the letter. "I wrote this," she said, "before the world changed, before I was seen." The room fell silent. "I never sent it," she added, "because I thought it would get lost. But now, I realize something. It doesn't matter how long it takes. What matters is that someone finally listens." She handed the letter to Modi. He took it with both hands, read it silently, then folded it carefully, and said, "This letter is now part of history." Later that day, a decision was announced. A new national archive would be created not for great laws or battles but for unheard voices. It would be called Letters of Belief, and meenals would be the first two. Entered. Back in Madhugram, the school celebrated. Arfa returned, with a medal in her bag and stars in her eyes. Deepak told everyone about the train, the buildings, the people in suits, but for Meenal, the greatest gift was still the same. The classroom one morning, as the children sat in rows. She picked up a small chalk and wrote on the board, "You matter, and your voice matters." Then she turned around and said, "Today we will learn not just math or grammar, but how to stand for what's right." "How?" someone asked. "By speaking the truth, kindly, and never sitting down when you know you should be standing." Years passed. The school grew. Children who once had no shoes became engineers, farmers, teachers, and leaders. They wrote letters to not always to Delhi but to each other. They shared ideas. They asked questions. They believed in the power of their own voice. Meenal taught until her hair turned gray. Even when she stepped down from full-time teaching, she visited the school every week. She helped children read, watered the plants, and sat with parents who were unsure how to help their kids. And one evening, as the sun sank behind the same tamarind trees that had once cast long shadows of resistance, Meenal stood at the school gate. A little girl she had never seen before walked up to her, holding a fresh notebook. "Are you the teacher?" she asked. Meenal smiled. "I was. Can I learn too?" She nodded. "Always." As they walked into the schoolyard together, hand in hand, the bell rang not just to begin a lesson, but to remind the world. One voice, one letter, one woman can begin a movement.